Cam, how are you?
All good, all good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Let's see. Do we have anybody else on your end that we are waiting for?
1 second, let me ask.
Okay,
No, but just
Okay, sorry.
cool. No worries. So, today was supposed to be a panel with both Bungee and DeFiSpot, but I just found out less than 10 minutes ago that DeFiSpot is unable to make it today. So, we might be a panel of two, just you and me.
It's all good. I'm sure we got this.
Yeah, so we'll be great. Um, well, I suppose then, without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So, thanks for joining. For those listening in, I'm Britt. I'm the community lead at Across, and I'll be hosting today. And we are joined by Bungie. Can you go ahead and give a quick intro to yourself and to Bungie?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for Across for having me on. I'm VC, one of the founders here. Bungee is a cross-chain bridge aggregator. It allows you to move from any token on chain A to whatever token you want on chain B. We definitely use Across as one of the bridging providers to kind of connect different chains. Yeah, excited to dive in.
Awesome. Thanks, BC. So yeah, let's dive right into our first question then. So how does a bridge aggregator ensure the security of the funds being transferred? And do you have any unique security features that you'd like to highlight that help you accomplish that?
Yeah, definitely a bunch of things that we've done there. I think our stance on bridge security or bridge aggregator security is um, the aggregation layer should not add any security assumptions at all. So it should be almost just like an efficient pass through. If the aggregator adds any security, then there is no point of using an aggregator. You have a better chance of going to the bridge directly, right? So when we started designing our smart contracts for this was our goal number one. Like, how do we build something that only acts as a transparent and more efficient gateway and does not actually add any security assumptions on top. A bunch of competitors did not kind of go for this approach, so they definitely add some security. Would love to kind of highlight on how we're able to build something that has the ability to upgrade. That is, add new bridge integrations on new features and stuff like that, but also is trustless. As I previously mentioned, right? So, whenever you're designing smart contracts, the number one thing that you think about is how do I design it such that if tomorrow something bad happens or if I want to upgrade it, it's we can always do that. So the two patterns that are common are one is like upgradability, where you use like proxies and stuff like that, and one is modularity, right? Quickly highlighting the difference between these two. Upgradability allows the team or the deployer or some set of parties to upgrade the contracts, meaning that you might interact with this contract thinking that it's going to do XYZ, but the team or like whoever is controlling the proxy has the authority to change what the contract does, and tomorrow it might do ABC, right? So people should be very careful when they interact with contracts that use proxy. Now, there is a reason why proxies exist, which is like, whenever you are building a product, you continuously learn new things, and you want to upgrade your smart contracts in order to act on your insights on chain, right? So it's clear that upgradability solves something, but it also introduces another problem. So now it's a good time to introduce what's modularity. Modularity is the good middle ground where when you interact with, for example, sockets contract, you see the contract, you see it on Etherscan, and you see that it does XYZ, right? Now the only thing Socket can do is pause the XYZ from happening, right? It can never edit XYZ and replace it by ABC, right? So this makes like Socket contracts immutable. Anyone that's building on Socket, that's interacting with Sockets, is interacting with an immutable contract. They don't have to be worried about the team or like someone who's controlling the proxy to kind of do something malicious. So I think this ability to be able to add features and not upgrade, I think that's the killer thing that we've built.
That's interesting. So if one of your if one of the features is becomes obsolete as like a hypothetical, or like if you need to drop a piece of the module and replace that with something else, is that something that is possible within the system?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, replacing is not possible. So whenever, let's say, we want to drop a feature or something, what we have to do is, as I mentioned, what we can do is pause stuff. So let's say we did an across integration and across want had an upgrade, right? So we obviously need to upgrade the implementation on our end as well. What happens in that case is we pause the existing integration and we deploy a new across module. So the old across module, the contracts do not give us permission to replace them or to upgrade them as they were, kind of built out before. So we almost have to add a new module, and then across routes can, start going from the new module. Yeah, hope that answers your
Yeah,
question.
yeah, perfect. So rather than like altering anything that's already deployed, you have to just redeploy each time there's a new upgrade, basically. Yeah.
Exactly,
and
exactly.
and that exists not as a like lesser way of doing it, but actually as a security enhancement for your users.
Yeah, I think the trade-off is really simple. The trade-off is higher deployment costs, and on the other side, for the users, they get immutable trustless contracts, right? And the gas cost or the higher deploy cost, that's kind of borne by the team, and it's very like module specific. So if we are going to upgrade across, that's the only new module we need to deploy. So I think for us, the trade-off made 100% complete sense. We would rather pay like a few bucks in deployment cost than have users trust the proxy.
Cool. If it's okay, I have a list of questions, but I might take us off the rails a little bit because I'm curious. Um, as an aggregator, I know your goal is not to add any security assumptions of the aggregator layer. And so I'm curious if you guys adopt the mindset of like do your own research for your users, where like you'll support any bridge that they want to support, and it's up to them to decide if they're willing to trust it, and you basically just plug directly into that. Or as an aggregator layer, do you feel some sense of like responsibility to do vetting of bridges on your own and make sure that it's a product that you want to support?
I think it's a mix of both things, and we've been going back and forth on this. To be really honest, I mean, from our perspective, as someone who's kind of building bridges in the space for the last 4 or 5 years, we definitely want to support as many trustless bridges as possible. But the reality of the situation is, trustless bridges have their own costs and their own trade-offs, and sometimes this trade-off is users need to kind of pay more bridging fees, or users need to pay more, let's say, gas cost, or users need to wait for longer. Right now, it's it's not wise for a product builder like us to kind of assume what users want. Users definitely want cheaper bridging, right? So I think as a bridge aggregator, we've kind of realized that we need to expose the entire spectrum of whatever trade-offs bridges are making to the end user, right? We of course need to do some like baseline research to make sure this like this not definitely something that's going to cause any security bottlenecks. But I think it's very baseline research, and after that we kind of open things up to the market, and we try to communicate as heavily as possible on different security properties, of the underlying bridges. I know you've like seen the L2Beat research stuff on
Yeah.
bridges, so that was built in collaboration with Team Socket. So we do our research. We try to communicate outputs from the security research in an easy digestible format to the end consumer via things like security scores, for example. So this research we did with L2Beat, we kind of designed a framework on how to evaluate bridges. Based on this framework, we assign every bridge a security score. Now people can choose to ignore this, or people can leverage this. So each bridge has a security score depending on this framework, and they can basically sort things out security wise if they think security is something they want to optimize for. Yeah. So our job is to provide a neutral, clear, transparent marketplace. Is how we see it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a tough question to answer for sure. And I think you guys walk that line very well because it is hard to sort of want the best for your customers, but like you said, you don't want to assume what the customers want all the time. Sometimes you have to like follow their lead a little bit as well. So yeah, a very very good answer to that. Thank you so much, VC. So that kind of like segues nicely into our next question, which is just what are the most common security threats to you as a bridge aggregator? Are there any things that are unique to you guys or something that's always front of mind in terms of security for your protocol?
That's a solid question. Um, Not too much, right? And that's a good thing. So the way that we've like designed things, let's say any swap has a situation. I know they're having a situation right now as well, but this has happened previously as well, where any swap had a bug and people who used any swap directly, their accounts were drained. It was an approval related bug, right? The good thing of using something like any swap via something like Socket is that users don't give direct approvals to the underlying bridge. They give approval to the gateway contract, which is our hub or like the orchestration contract, and this contract then internally kind of interacts with the underlying bridge, and we kind of handle approvals very carefully there. So I think if we handle the approvals carefully from the gateway to the bridge, there is almost nothing the bridge can do to kind of harm our system. Although all bridges have some kind of like off-chain dependency, and sometimes not all bridge providers kind of do upgrades responsibly. What this means is, this has happened in past where bridge providers have upgraded stuff on their off-chain components that has resulted in user transactions failing, right? Slowly we've built like enough infrastructure on our end to kind of detect when this happens and kind of fix things up fairly quickly. But I think this is like one of the, I think reliability is the piece that they can that bridge providers can bother us with, but not security.
Gotcha. So the the biggest hindrance for you isn't necessarily security, but more like operational logic around um, things
Exactly.
like liquidity, for example.
Yeah, exactly. That's 100% accurate.
And so, how do you guys handle that risk of liquidity shortage or like excessive volatility, stuff like that? What have you done on your end to try and make that a bit more stable for your users?
I think what we've done on our end is, before we show it out to the end user, we always do liquidity checks, as in kind of make sure there is liquidity available on the other side so that people can, kind of cash out. Not only this, we have some liquidity multipliers as well. For example, if a user is trying to bridge 1,000 USDC, we make sure there is at least 2,000 USDC on the other side that is available for the user to withdraw. So we do some small stuff like this, but the pointing to the previous two questions on security and reliability, one thing that I want to kind of share with the community here is that um, we realize that making frameworks and kind of educating users on security properties, That's one way to solve the bridge security problem. The other way to do that is by allowing researchers or like market makers or like people who are willing to take the risk kind of basically price in the security or the reliability risk of the underlying bridges. So along with risk harbor, we are working on something called bridge protection, which allows for just this. Basically you can outsource all the reliability and bridge security risk to people who are willing to take that risk for some fees, right? Which is the protection premium or whatever, right? And what the users get in return, they don't have to worry if the bridge is going to get hacked or not. They don't have to be worried if the bridge is going to have liquidity issues or not. They don't have to be worried if the bridge is going to be down or not. Yeah, there is an external party who is taking on this risk for our premium. So this is another experiment in this whole grand scheme of things that we are trying out. This is going live slowly on Bungie, and we are excited to see if people like it or not.
Interesting. That's super cool. So when you describe that, it sounds kind of similar to our relayers. And just a quick recap for anybody listening: the way Across works is, as a user, you submit a deposit, and then a third-party relayer on your destination chain will front the money, and they assume that risk for a short window of time. And then if everything goes through okay, they're basically compensated plus a fee for taking on that risk. And so they provide protection both to users and to the passive LPs of our protocol. So I'm curious how the socket or the Bungee relayer would work in addition to that, or would they sort of like fulfill both of those roles? What do you think that would look like, VC?
Yeah, that's a solid question. I think there are some important differences here. Just to highlight a few of those. So across relayers, for example, fronts USDC, right? Versus Risk Harbor, who's the protection provider that Bungie will be using, does not have to front capital, right? Across relayers will be fronting capital. All they are betting on is making sure that across has enough capital, enough relayers running that will be fronting the capital. So the capital that these protection providers like Harbor have on their end, it does not have to be pure USDC, for example. It could be a USDC or compound USDC or something like that. They just have to hold enough capital to give out in case across is down for some reason, right? So that's number one. Risk harbor protectors don't have to hold native USDC; they can hold a yield earning asset. The second is it's not really a difference, but just how differently things are structured. So across layers are essentially settling against the native bridges, or I think the UMA optimistic oracle. And you can think of bridging protection as settling against, across, and hop and stuff like that. So it's almost like a layer on top that settles with the underlying bridge. Does that make any sense?
Totally, yeah. So it sounds like an insurance, basically like an insurance relayer where they're like if their capital ever has to be deployed, it's because something went wrong.
I wouldn't call it insurance, mostly because that sets wrong expectations. So I would actually call it protection. The reason being, this is more than insurance. So insurance kind of protects you against bridge getting hacked or something, but bridge protection stuff that Risk Harbor is building, that will also protect you against the bridge having some liquidity issues or some downtime.
Gotcha.
So it's a reliability and bridge safety, um, kind of protection.
Yeah, maybe insurance wasn't the right choice of words there. Basically, well, and guarantee isn't either. We never want to guarantee anything. Protection is the right word. You got it. You nailed it. So good work there. But yeah, that's very cool. So then a question that I have on top of that would be basically like Bungie will quote a user based on their preferences, which bridge path that they should take. Will this protection layer operate regardless of what the user chooses? Like if they choose, if across, for example, is the bottom recommendation, and they say, I want to go ahead and use across anyways, but I do want to pay for this protection or whatever, because it's an opt-in service, right?
Exactly, it's an add-on
Yeah.
service.
So if they go ahead and add on to that, will it cover regardless of which route they choose?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will be launching with some limited routes. AnySwap was one of those. Let's see how that happens. But yeah, we are launching with some routes, but the idea is to expand to all bridges. And yeah, wherever protection is available, people can opt in. They have full freedom to choose any route they want.
That's super cool. And I imagine that that would come in handy when, for big like exit events, basically. Like we've only had a couple times where our bridge has been sort of at capacity, or people had to wait for an extended amount of time. And so this is kind of where that would kick in. Basically, this sort of idle capital would now become available and act as like an extension of that bridge, and so users wouldn't get stuck in limbo.
Essentially, yeah, I think on our end, what we noticed was like, it's because like bridging is async, it's almost impossible for bridge providers to promise a maximum bridging time. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So there is a average bridging time. There is a median bridging time, but because things are happening async, there is no maximum. So we could never kind of give any sort of like guarantees or like some sort of like strong guarantees to the end user that you will receive your money in, let's say, the next 2 to 2 hours, right? But something like this gives us the ability to define a maximum, which I think is super important and people really want it.
Yeah, I love that. And in theory, right, like as the bridge space improves, um, like the goal with a product like this is to put itself out of business, right? I mean, it's needed now, but in a perfect world, or in a world where we have a billion crypto users, hopefully we would have refined things enough to not need something like that, or
I
very low
mean,
use of it.
that's a good question. So I see this thing kind of happening in or like this thing ending in like multiple ways. So what's essentially happening here is you're outsourcing all the bit security risk and the reliability risk to a third party, right? So no matter what happens, some of these risks will always remain. Like they might become small and small, but they'll still remain. We also cannot ignore that there will be more bridges launching, and hence the demand will also kind of still remain for something like this. But more or less, I do really hope that the reliability and the safety problems in the existing multi-chain world kind of slowly go away, and hopefully no one needs protection in the next coming five
Yeah,
years.
awesome. I love the optimism. And so before we just move on, I want to touch just on this third party validation question one, like a little bit more. We talked about it a bit, but I know in the past, like L2 Beat has sometimes criticized security of some bridge validation forms that use a third party validation. I think your answer is going to be that it depends. But what are your thoughts on third party validators, and are there any like red flags that you think of when a protocol uses third party validation?
I mean, so my background is I've been building bridges and L2s for quite a bit. So I definitely have a soft corner for trustless bridges. I I really think we need a lot more of those. But as I previously mentioned, right, a lot of these implementations. I mean, this whole kind of bridging space kind of operates on a trade-off spectrum, and users lie at every point in the spectrum, right? There are people who will take cheaper but less secure bridges, and there are people who will take the most secure bridge and are willing to pay $100 extra for it. So from our perspective, we think it's important to serve the whole spectrum, and we want developers to take the decision for their end users on what they want to what part of the spectrum they want to expose to their users. For someone who's building something in the NFT space, it might be really, really important for things to be as fast as possible, as cheap as possible, for the UX to be something that retails can, digest. But for someone like, let's say, some institutional money market provider, for them, security will be top of the mind, right? Yeah, so I think for us, it's important to kind of, serve the whole spectrum. And unfortunately, we don't have any good trustless validation mechanism that can expand to all chains and kind of serve the whole spectrum. So I think third party bridges, while not being great on security, are needed by a good spectrum of users.
Yeah, amen to that. Um, Perfect. So then thinking forward again, I think you kind of maybe have already answered this with your solution, but basically, how do you think that aggregators will play a role in changing some of the negative sentiment towards the security of cross-chain transfers going forward? I think that your protection, sorry, what is this product called again? Your protection product?
Yeah, it's bridge
Just
protection.
bridge
Yeah.
protection. Cool. I think the bridge protection is a really solid offering that would help a lot of users feel more comfortable once they know about it. Um, what else do you think, as an aggregator, what role will you play in kind of helping to reduce that negative sentiment towards the security of cross-chain bridging?
Yeah, I think one part of security is just awareness, right? As a user who does not use an aggregator, I can't imagine what the amount of confusion they might have while trying to bridge from one place to the next. There is no like kind of transparent, clear instructions on like what to do, what what's really going to happen here if I press the bridge button. So I think a bunch of users, they just press the bridge button and they start praying to Lord that they get money on the other side. So I think as an aggregator, we have the opportunity here to kind of almost like hold their hands and walk them through exactly what's going to happen, what's the trade-off that you are kind of choosing, and just kind of help them make better choices according to whatever better means for them, right? So I think just like kind of becoming this marketplace that people or the market uses, that also allows bridge builders to have a clear view on what does the market wants. It's market at some point might want really secure bridging, but in bull markets they might want cheap and fast bridging, right? So it allows bridge builders to kind of get a sense of like what are users opting into, where's the volume flowing, and kind of optimize their bridge building accordingly.
Yeah, that's super interesting to talk about the different market dimensions. Uh, just like off the top of your head, in today's market where we're at right now, what between like the three considerations between like speed, security, and cost, what do you see today as like the most important feature for users? What are they trying to optimize on?
I think in terms of people who interact, um, so it depends on size, right? Size around like 10K, 20K, they definitely want like fast and cheap. Um, Going beyond that, people want cheaper much more than faster, right? So going beyond 20K, they want something that's extremely cheap. If it's not fast, that's okay, because what people are really trying to do is like preserve on capital after that. And then if we go beyond $1 million and the customer segment becomes like wallets and institutions, then all they care about is safety, right? They don't care much about the price. They don't care much about how long it'll take. They just want like really, really high guarantees that this is going to be a success. And if they're bridging $10 million, they are going to get $10 million in whatever time was defined. So reliability and security become a big thing there.
Yeah, solid answer. I love it. Okay, last question for you. So, is there one thing that you think that the general public should know about bridge security that typically goes under people's radar? Like, do you have any sort of like uh, superior knowledge that if you could like tell people one thing about bridge security that you think they might not know, what would it be?
I think the one thing would be definitely, I think a good amount of people might know this, but always try to get the native asset on the other side. Do not settle for wrapped asset bridges. The problem with these bridges is not that they are insecure, and that's one of them. But the problem with these kind of bridge setups essentially is that even after you are done bridging, you will kind of be exposed to the bridge risk. But if you stick to bridging native asset from one chain to the native asset on another chain, as soon as you are done bridging, you are not exposed to the bridge risk at all. Even if the bridge goes wrecked, you are safe because you are holding the native asset on that side, right? So I think that's the only thing I would like to push. Of course, if you're a Bungie user, we've never integrated wrapped asset bridges. We only integrate native asset bridges. So if you're a Bungie user, you are never exposed to bridge hacks after you've completed the bridging, right? Yeah, so I think that's one strong stance there.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that answer. I think about that a lot, and I didn't know that about Bungie actually, that you guys don't support any of those wrapped pathways. So very cool to hear. I love it. I'm more and more bullish on Bungie every day. So for anybody here who hasn't tried out Bungie, please do. I'll even send you away from across his UI. Just go to Bungie and try it out. We put in a lot of work to try and make sure that we uh, are the recommended path, or at least in the top 2 recommended paths. And so if ever you're trying to bridge somewhere that we support, I do recommend going to Bungie. And if we're not recommended in the top 2 pathways, come find me and I'll give you a little bounty for your time. So, uh,
Love
yeah,
it.
thanks again, VC, for joining us today. Had a lot of fun. Sorry that it wasn't a panel for those listening, but I think you guys got some good alpha on Bungie's bridge protection product. So really looking forward to seeing more on that. And yeah, thanks
Perfect.
again, guys.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.